Want to know why? Ask how. Howard the Humongous. What was the role of sex in the romance of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII? Did their courtship do what Pierre-Louis de Maupertuis decrees, finding the shortest distance between 2 points? Or did it do something far more ambitious? Did it create the longest distance between 2 points? Did it harness the hurricanes of history? Or, to put it differently, is the story of Anne and Henry simple and thrifty, or expensive and complex? You be the judge. When Anne Boleyn was 16, Europe was in turmoil, religious turmoil. A church run in Rome had held Europe in a headlock since 323 AD, when the Roman Emperor Constantine had converted to Christianity. Romans who believed in Jupiter, Juno, and Mars had called the head of their pagan college of priests the Pontifex Maximus. The newly Christian emperor took that pagan title for himself, thus declaring himself head of the Christian religion. Over 1,200 years later, when the Renaissance sparked a fascination with ancient Roman history, popes would resurrect that pagan title, Pontifex Maximus, and give it to themselves. And they would give themselves the power the title implied, the power over an earthly empire. Then a whole new world with 2 entirely unknown continents was discovered by Europeans in the 1490s. Suddenly, the Catholic Church not only had a grip on all of Europe, but was eager to go global. 19 years after the first voyage of Christopher Columbus, a 28-year-old monk from the tiny copper and silver mining town of Mansfield in Germany headed to Rome to get his first glimpse of the control center of his religion. At that moment, the church whose bureaucratic system he was entering seemed anxious to demonstrate its position as the #1 connection with God on the planet. One reason the church may have wanted to make a statement is that the rapidly expanding empire of the Turks was threatening to invade and run Christendom off the map. The church had chosen a tool to tattoo its grandeur into human minds, a spectacle of materialism, consumerism, waste, and vain display beyond what humans had ever seen. A project so expensive and so elaborate that it would take 100 years and 5 generations of architects to complete. Among those architects would be Michelangelo. The mega project would be St. Peter's Basilica. One goal may have been to outshine any other religious complex of its kind, whether that competitor be Istanbul's Hagia Sophia Mosque in the capital of the Islamic Empire, the Huaycali Temple in the heart of Aztec Mexico, or the Temple of Heaven in Beijing. In 1505, Pope Julius had the plans, but he needed the money. Fortunately for him, the church had invented a money raiser par excellence 1,000 years earlier. The church held the keys to your afterlife, to your endless residence after death in the sunlit clouds of heaven or in the flame-flicked torture chambers of hell. Why not cash in on the fear of hell and its waiting room, purgatory? Why not sell certificates that would reduce your time in the torments of the afterlife's nether rooms? Certificates with which the church and the Pope guaranteed to get you time off in exchange for a contribution that would go to pay for Pope Julius's wild wallow in architectural extravagance, his wild splurge in materialism, consumerism, waste, and vain display. The funding certificates were called indulgences, and Pope Julius invented a new indulgence to rake in the loot. Priests like Johann Tetzel, Grand Commissioner for Indulgences in Germany, would become hawkers for these afterlife alleviation certificates. And these certificates disturbed the monk from Mansfeld. One line in particular bothered him. As Haley Nolan puts it in her book Anne Boleyn, 500 Years of Lies, the monk was horrified when the super salesman of the new certificates, Tetzel, preached that the indulgences he was selling were so powerful they could even get, quote, a sinner who had violated the Virgin Mary, close quote, out of hell's barbecue pit. Yes, you could rape or seduce the Virgin Mary herself, and this mega indulgence would pay off your time in hell. It would set you free from having your earlobes set aflame and your derriere sautéed in a cast iron frying pan. But the monk visiting Rome for the first time would eventually declare that indulgences are nothing but knavery and fraud. So in standard histories, it is said that Martin Luther wrote 95 theses objecting to what he saw as corrupt church practices and pinned them to the door of the cathedral in the German town of Wittenberg. Haley Nolan writes that Luther was actually less dramatic. He sent his theses to the Bishop of Mainz for approval, she explains, and he accompanied his theses with a very polite letter. One way or the other, Martin Luther's 95 theses went viral. Printing was a new technology. Christopher Columbus, an arch pamphleteer, had come back to Europe from Cuba and Santo Domingo just 24 years earlier in 1493 and had promptly shown how you could change the way Europeans saw their entire world with printed flyers about his discoveries. 24 years later, the printers of pamphlets saw the glimmer of a prophet in Martin Luther's complaints and spread them with wild abandon. Luther's criticisms became the talk of Europe nearly overnight, and his protests against the church helped change Europe's future. Why? Rulers had battled with the church for more than 400 years over the control of their kingdom's bureaucracies. A long series of popes had insisted on appointing all of the bishops and abbots under a king, thus leaving you, a ruler, stuck with a team of church officials who owed their loyalty to the Pope in Rome, not to you. And those officials were the most literate men in your kingdom. In other words, they were the backbone of the team with which you ran the place. Kings like the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV objected. But the Pope always won out in the end. But what if the grievances of Martin Luther, the furious monk, were on point? What if they communicated the will of God more accurately than a college of cardinals and a pope? You, a monarch, could adopt Lutheranism, shake off the shackles of the Vatican, and appoint your own church bureaucrats. So prince after prince rebelled against the church and adopted the religion of protest, Protestantism. They adopted Lutheranism. The result would be 173 years of war between the rebelling rulers and the potentates who held steadfast to the papacy. Yes, the result would be 173 years of war between the Protestants and the Catholics. Henry and Anne's romance would enter the scene just as these wars were getting started, and just before the battle for hearts and minds of kings and princes was about to reach full boil. In fact, Henry and Anne's sexual interest in each other would arrive just as the winds of mass behavior were gathering to create a hurricane of history. This is Howard Bloom, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to create, or, want to know why? Ask how. And now for the infamous, sleazy, slimy, sausage-like, but very, very sneaky and impossible to find little off button.